In the heart of Iowa, a small, unassuming town holds a dark secret. Villisca, Iowa, seems like any other quiet Midwestern community. White picket fences line manicured lawns. Neighbors greet each other on the street, but one house stands apart from the rest. It is a simple, white-framed house on East 2nd Street. It has a porch, a yard, and windows that look out onto a peaceful neighborhood. But behind its ordinary facade lies a story of unimaginable terror. This is not just a house, it is a tomb. It is a place where a brutal, unsolved crime silenced an entire family, and its echoes still resonate over a century later. The house at 508 East 2nd Street is known today as the Villisca Axe Murder House. Its name alone sends a shiver down the spine. It has become a landmark of American true crime. For generations, its story has been whispered in hushed tones. Long before it became a haunted attraction and a subject of countless books and television shows, it was simply a home. It was the home of the Moore family. Josiah Joe B. Moore, his wife Sarah, their first child, their second child, their third child, their fourth child. They were a respected and well-liked family in Villisca. Their home was filled with the sounds of children's laughter, the warmth of family life, and the promise of a bright future. No one could have ever imagined that this very house would become the setting for their horrific end. On a single June night in 1912, the American dream, as lived by the Moore family, was destroyed. The day was Monday, June 10th, 1912. The morning sun rose over Villisca, promising another warm summer day. But an unusual silence hung over the Moore residence. Neighbors noticed the house was still and quiet. The chickens hadn't been fed. The morning chores were left undone. This was highly uncharacteristic of the industrious Moore family. Mary Peckham, their next-door neighbor, became concerned as the hours passed. She tried calling, but there was no answer. She knocked on the door, but only silence greeted her. A deep sense of unease began to settle over the quiet street as the morning wore on, a feeling that something was terribly, terribly wrong. After her attempts to rouse the family failed, she contacted Joe Moore's brother, Ross. Ross arrived, carrying a set of keys to his brother's home. He tried the door, but it was locked from the inside. Unable to gain entry, he peered through a bedroom window. What he saw would haunt him for the rest of his days. In the dim light of the room, he could just make out a figure on a bed, covered by a blood-soaked sheet. A dark stain had seeped through the bedding, a silent testament to a horrific event. Panic seized him, and he immediately sent for the town marshal, Hank Horton. When Marshal Horton finally forced the door open, he stepped into a scene of unimaginable carnage. The house was unnaturally still and dark. Every window had been covered with cloth or clothing, plunging the rooms into a gloomy twilight. In the downstairs bedroom, just off the parlor, lay the bodies of two guests, Lena Stillinger, Ina Stillinger. In the adjacent room lay their four children, Herman, Catherine, Boyd, Paul. An entire family of 6, along with their 2 young guests, had been systematically slaughtered. The news spread through Villisca like a shockwave, plunging the small, tight-knit community into a state of collective shock, grief, and a paralyzing fear. The crime scene inside the Moore house was a landscape of methodical brutality. Investigators who entered the home were met with a chilling and macabre tableau. The killer had moved with a disturbing calmness and purpose. In the downstairs bedroom, the Stillinger sisters, and in the upstairs rooms, the Moore family. The victims' heads had all been covered with bedclothes after they were killed. It was as if the murderer could not bear to look at the faces of those he had just so viciously slain. A single grisly weapon was found. Leaning against the wall in the downstairs bedroom, near the bodies of Lena and Ina Stillinger, was a bloodied axe. It belonged to Josiah Moore and had been left in the backyard. The killer had apparently found it there, brought it inside, and used it to commit the 8 murders. After the slaughter was complete, the murderer did not flee with the weapon, but simply left it behind. The killer's actions after the murders were just as bizarre as the crime itself. A 2-pound slab of uncooked bacon was found on the floor of the downstairs bedroom, wrapped in a dish towel. Nearby, a keychain lay on the floor, which was later identified as not belonging to the Moore family. In the kitchen, investigators found a bowl of bloody water. suggesting the killer had attempted to wash his hands before leaving. He had also searched the house, opening drawers and rummaging through closets, though nothing of significant value appeared to have been stolen. Perhaps the most unsettling discovery of all involved the mirrors. From the large mirror in the parlor to the small dressing mirrors in the bedrooms, each one was carefully covered. This act, combined with the covering of the victims' faces, has fueled endless speculation. Was the killer tormented by his own reflection? Was he acting out some obscure personal ritual? This detail, more than any other, seemed to lift the crime from the realm of a simple robbery or act of revenge into something far stranger and more ritualistic. A dark ceremony performed in the dead of night. These strange details only deepened the mystery, painting a picture of a killer whose motives were utterly incomprehensible. The covered mirrors, the bacon, the washing of hands, the sealing of the house, all pointed to a meticulous, patient, deeply disturbed individual whose motives remained locked away in the darkness of his own mind. The baffling details found at the scene left investigators struggling to form a coherent theory of the crime. The covered mirrors became a central point of speculation so strange it seemed to defy logical explanation. Some investigators believed it was a sign of remorse. Others suggested superstition, mirrors trapping souls. This resonated with rural folklore, making the murderer seem less like a man and more like a phantom. The slab of bacon found near the Stillinger sisters, bacon on the bedroom floor. Why would a killer stop to retrieve bacon from the icebox and leave it by the bodies? Some thought it was a post-mortem ritual. Others thought it was a crude, insulting message. It was absurd in a scene of horror, confounding analysts for over a century. The bowl of bloody water in the kitchen, a chilling, practical clue. It showed the killer had remained in the house. He was not in a hurry to flee. He pumped water from the cistern and washed the blood from his hands. This implied composure and control, moving through a silent house with calm precision. The image of the killer alone in the dark kitchen, washing away evidence, is one of the most haunting details. He had locked the doors from the inside and covered all the windows. This suggested familiarity with the layout and intention to stay, unconcerned about discovery. The covered mirrors, the bacon, the washing of hands, the sealing of the house all pointed to a meticulous, patient, deeply disturbed individual whose motives remained locked away in the darkness of his own mind. Each bizarre detail seemed to deepen rather than clarify the mystery. The killer's true identity and motive remained as covered as the mirrors he had so carefully draped. One of the most prominent and bizarre suspects to emerge was a traveling minister named Reverend George Kelly. He was an odd, slightly built man. He had a history of mental instability and a reported obsession with sex crimes. Kelly had been a guest preacher in Villisca. He'd even attended the Children's Day exercises that evening. The Moore family, the Stillinger sisters. His presence in town on that fateful night cast a shadow of suspicion upon him. That shadow would follow him for years to come. Reverend Kelly's behavior in the weeks and months following the murders was highly erratic. He reportedly confessed to the crime on a train, telling a fellow passenger that the souls of the slain children were crying out to him from the ground. He later wrote a series of strange, rambling letters to investigators. The letters displayed an unusually detailed knowledge of the crime scene. He even returned to Villisca several years later. During a police interrogation, he provided a chillingly detailed confession. His confession was so convincing that authorities were certain they'd finally found their man. The town held its breath, hoping for closure. Despite his detailed confession, the case against Kelly began to crumble. His defense team argued he was mentally ill and that the confession was a product of a troubled mind seeking attention. They claimed he had been coerced by relentless interrogators who fed him details of the crime. During his first trial, the jury was unable to reach a verdict. A hung jury. The prosecution tried him a second time. The second trial ended in a swift acquittal. Reverend George Kelly walked free. The acquittal left a lingering cloud of doubt. Was he a manipulative killer who feigned insanity to escape justice? Or was he a disturbed and innocent man who became ensnared in a sensational case? For many, Kelly would always be the one who got away. The phantom killer hiding behind the cloak of religion and madness. Another powerful suspect emerged from within Villisca's own community, State Senator Frank F. Jones. Jones was a prominent and influential figure in town. but he was also a bitter business rival of Josiah Moore. Joe Moore had worked for Jones for many years at his farm implement store before leaving to start his own directly competing business. Moore had been very successful, taking a significant amount of business away from Jones. Rumors swirled through town that the animosity between the two men ran deep, providing a powerful motive for revenge. This theory suggested the crime was not a random act, but a targeted assassination born of professional jealousy. The theory implicating Senator Jones did not suggest that he personally wielded the axe. At his age, it was unlikely he could have committed such a physically demanding crime. Instead, it was whispered that Jones had hired a hitman to do his dirty work. This theory gained traction as people looked for a local explanation for the crime. The idea of an outside drifter was terrifying, but the thought of a powerful man within their own community orchestrating such a horrific act was, in some ways, even more chilling. Suspicion fell on a man named William Blackie Mansfield as the possible hired killer. Proponents of the Jones theory believed that the senator had paid Mansfield to travel to Villisca and eliminate his business rival. While this theory was compelling and provided a clear motive, it was built almost entirely on circumstantial evidence and town gossip. Despite the lack of concrete evidence, a grand jury was convened to investigate Jones's potential involvement. However, after hearing the testimony, the grand jury found insufficient evidence to indict him, and he was officially cleared of any involvement. Despite being legally exonerated, the cloud of suspicion never fully lifted from Frank F. Jones. For many residents of Villisca, he remained the most logical suspect. The shadow of the Villisca axe murders would hang over Frank F. Jones for the rest of his life. As investigators cast a wider net, their attention turned to a man named William Blackie Mansfield. Mansfield, a drifter. Mansfield, a suspected serial killer with a dark and violent history. He was believed responsible for a string of similar axe murders: Colorado, Kansas, Illinois. The pattern was eerily similar. Entire families bludgeoned to death in their beds with an axe. Crime scenes featuring bizarre and ritualistic elements. That raised the terrifying possibility, not an isolated event, but a multi-state killing spree by a single nomadic predator. The case against Mansfield seemed compelling. Burns Detective Agency investigator James Newton Wilkerson became convinced of Mansfield's guilt. Wilkerson's theory: Mansfield was a cocaine addict. Wilkerson's theory: Mansfield worked as a hired killer. Wilkerson's theory: he was paid by Senator Frank F. Jones to eliminate Joe Moore. Wilkerson's timeline: Mansfield arrived in a nearby town by train. He walked to Villisca under cover of darkness. He committed the murders. He fled before sunrise. Wilkerson got affidavits from witnesses claiming they saw Mansfield in the area. A grand jury indicted William Mansfield in 1916, 4 years after the crime. He was arrested in Kansas City and brought to Montgomery County for trial. The prosecution's case quickly fell apart under scrutiny. Mansfield had a solid alibi. Payroll records from a construction company in Illinois proved he was working there at the time. It was physically impossible for him to have been in Villisca on the night of June 9th. The evidence was irrefutable. The case collapsed completely. After charges were dropped, Mansfield was released. He sued Wilkerson and the Burns Detective Agency for false arrest and won a significant settlement. The serial killer theory had reached a dead end and the mystery deepened. The immediate aftermath of the murders plunged Villisca into a state of absolute terror and paranoia. The brutal slaughter of a well-known family and their young guests shattered the community's sense of safety. No one felt secure in their own homes anymore. Doors that were once left unlocked were now bolted, barred. Families slept in shifts with one person always standing guard, armed with a shotgun, armed with a pistol. A creaking floorboard, a dog barking in the night could send a wave of panic through a household. Fear settled over the town like a suffocating fog. Fear turned to suspicion. Neighbors eyed neighbors with distrust. Law enforcement failed to make a swift arrest. The killer could still be living among them. The quiet man down the street, the rival businessman, the strange minister who had just been in town. Rumors and accusations poisoned the town's social fabric. Friendships were destroyed, reputations were ruined, the town split into factions. Unity and trust were casualties, just as surely as the Moore family. The crime drew a morbid circus to Villisca. Reporters arrived from across the country. Souvenir hunters descended on the town. Some broke into the murder house. Others chipped away blood-stained wallpaper and wood as gruesome mementos. Constant scrutiny kept the town's wound from healing. Villisca was no longer a quiet Iowa farm town. It was infamous. Its name was forever linked to a horrific, unsolved massacre. Over time, fear subsided, but a lasting scar remained on the town's psyche. Generations passed down the story, a local legend all too real. Over a century has passed since that terrible night in 1912, yet the Villisca axe murders remain one of America's most profound and chilling unsolved mysteries. The fundamental question, who killed the Moore family and the Stillinger sisters, is as unanswered today as it was on that horrific June morning. Was it the disturbed Reverend Kelly, confessing from a place of guilt or delusion? Was it a hired killer acting on the orders of the resentful Senator Jones? Or was it an unknown drifter, a phantom serial killer who slipped into town, committed an unspeakable act, and vanished back into the darkness without a trace? Each theory is compelling, yet none is supported by enough evidence to provide a definitive answer. The lack of a conviction has allowed the case to transcend the boundaries of true crime and enter the realm of modern folklore. The house itself has become the focal point of this legacy. Today, it is preserved not as a home, but as a historical crime scene and a paranormal hotspot. Thousands of visitors, from serious historians to thrill-seeking ghost hunters, walk its creaking floors each year. They come to feel the chill in the air, to see the covered mirrors, and to stand in the rooms where 8 people lost their lives. The house serves as a tangible link to the past, a place where the echoes of the tragedy are said to still linger. The enduring fascination with the Villisca murders lies in the perfect storm of its elements. The brutality of the crime, the innocence of the victims, especially the 6 children, the bizarre and ritualistic details of the crime scene, and the complete failure to achieve justice all combine to create a story that is both terrifying and captivating. It is a real-life horror story that taps into our deepest fears. The vulnerability of being asleep in our own beds, the idea that evil can strike without reason, and the unsettling notion that some crimes are so perfectly executed that they may never be solved. The Villisca Axe Murder House stands as a monument to the unknown, ensuring that the 8 souls lost on that night will never be forgotten.